How's it going, folks? This is Mike, back to do another chapter of the name tag video that I'm still doing with my friend Rob from Rob's Movie Collection. And this time I'm doing dramatic films. And Rob's already finished, and I'm getting way behind on everything, so I'll try to go through this very quickly. All right. So, starting off with letter M for the name Michael. This is from 1961, The Misfits. Okay, classic film starring Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, Montgomery Clift, Eli Wallach, and Thelma Ritter, directed by John Huston. Now, this is a very downbeat and depressing story. Marilyn Monroe plays a woman named Rosalind who goes to Reno, Nevada to get a quick divorce from her husband, Kevin McCarthy. And while she's there, she's kind of drifting, not knowing what's going to happen in her life. She gets involved with these three misfit characters, an old cowboy played by Clark Gable, whom she gets very attracted to, and they start having a kind of an difficult romance. Also, rodeo star Montgomery Clift, who's way past his prime, and a very unhappy mechanic played by Eli Wallach. And these three men are all friends. They put Rosalind kind of at the center of their existence because they're so attracted to this very beautiful and very sensitive creature. And it's a very sad story, but played well by everybody concerned. Um, it's also sad to note that it was the last film by both Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe. Clark Gable died very shortly after the film was finished, and Marilyn Monroe, of course, would die the following year. Very good film, not completely successful, but well directed by John Huston, and very much worth seeing. Okay. For the letter I, here's a 1941 mystery film noir called I Wake Up Screaming, starring Betty Grable, Victor Mature, Carol Landis, and Laird Krager. The whole thing centers around a woman who has been murdered, a young woman named Vicki Lynn, played by Carol Landis, who is the sister of the character played by Betty Grable. And let me read you. The plot gets kind of convoluted, so let me read you. In this tense noir thriller, Victor Mature plays Frankie Christopher, a sports promoter who's in the hot seat, relentlessly grilled by a ruthless detective played by Laird Krager after the murder of a fashion model, Vicki Lynn, played by Carol Landis, this woman who he made famous. And going against him even more heavily is the fact that he's in love with the dead girl's sister, played by Betty Grable. But Frankie's not the only suspect in this taut expose of New York's cafe society. And a very good movie. Gorgeous black and white, very dark, shadowy photography. And it's interesting that 20th Century Fox would put Betty Grable in a film like this when she was really becoming a major star, and the biggest star at 20th Century Fox for her very colorful musical comedies, and then they would put her in something dramatic like this. But she's very good. It's a very good movie with a lot of twists and turns, and good performance by Laird Krager. Okay, for the letter C, out of this very plain box, this is a film called A Child Is Waiting from 1962, directed by John Cassavetes, produced by Stanley Kramer at Paramount. And it was one of the two studio films that John Cassavetes did after he made a very big success with his underground film Shadows. He was given a contract to do two studio films, and that was the last time he ever did that because he wanted to control his films completely, and found out that if he was working for other people, he couldn't do that. Anyway, it stars Burt Lancaster and Judy Garland. Also supporting players Stephen Hill, Jenna Rollins, who of course is John Cassavetes' wife, and Lawrence Tierney. And it's about a school for retarded children managed by Burt Lancaster, and he hires Judy Garland, who plays a character named Jean Hansen, who's a woman who's very troubled and is trying to find her place in life, hires her to teach music to these children. And she finds herself getting way too personally involved with them, especially with one kid played by Bruce Ritchie, and he gets very attached to her. He happens to be the son of Jenna Rollins and Stephen Hill. And it gets very complicated because she cannot be objective about this kid, and that puts her in conflict with not only Burt Lancaster, the head of the school, but with the mother and stepfather of the child. So it's a very dramatic story. Judy Garland is very good and almost it's almost difficult to watch because difficult to watch because she is so over emotional as Judy Garland often is, but it's definitely worth seeing. For the film, they used a lot of children who are mentally challenged. The young man Bruce Ritchie was not, so he was playing a part, but it's a very realistic and very good film. Okay, the next up for the letter H is another mystery detective thriller called He Walked by Night from the year 1948. Yes, 1948. It stars Richard Basehart as a cop killer. At the beginning of the film, he's getting ready to commit a robbery, and he's investigated by a policeman, and he kills him. So the rest of the story is the investigation by detectives Scott Brady and James Cardwell to find this killer. Okay, and it's very dramatic. It's kind of a semi-documentary style. Very good performances by everybody, especially by Richard Basehart. Now, what's interesting about this? It's based on actual accounts, based on an actual character, a case study in Los Angeles of a guy who killed a cop and was very hard to track down. So they had police personnel being technical advisors for the film. One of the supporting actors in the film is Jack Webb, who of course later on became famous for the TV show Dragnet. Now, while he was doing this film, he got to know some of these policemen, and it gave him the idea for Dragnet. First was a radio show, and later on the TV show. So very good film to watch. Very exciting. For the letter A, here's a film called Another Man's Poison, starring Bette Davis and Gary Merrill, also with Emlyn Williams. This was made in 1951 after Gary Merrill and Bette Davis had played together so well in All About Eve in 1950. This was their next film that they played in together, and by that time they were married. And the film was produced, one of the producers of the film was Douglas Fairbanks Jr. It was made in England, and it's a very complicated and convoluted story about love and betrayal and murder and all sorts of really creepy stuff. What Bette Davis looks like and very much is acting like, exactly like she did in All About Eve. So in a way, she's channeling Margot Channing, but it's fascinating to watch. Not a completely successful movie, but it is really interesting to watch. Okay, Another Man's Poison. All right, for the letter E, I don't have a lot of movies starting with the letter E, so I picked one that I've talked about before fairly recently. This is Jake Gyllenhaal in Enemy, which came out in 2014. Very strange little movie that you really need to see just because it's so weird. Jake Gyllenhaal plays a very mild-mannered history professor who one night is watching a cheap B movie on television, and he sees an actor who is his exact double, and he becomes obsessed with finding this guy, finding out who he is and how they could be so much alike. So they do meet, and from that point on, their lives become very strangely intertwined and intersected, and it has one of the weirdest, totally unexplainable endings of any film that I've ever seen. Good acted by Jake Gyllenhaal. He's very convincing as two different characters, so worth seeing. Enemy. Okay, and the last film, this is the letter L. This is another film noir from the late 1940s called Lady in the Lake, based on a story by Raymond Chandler. In fact, the main character in the film, played by actor Robert Montgomery, who also directs the film, is Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler's very famous detective. Now, what's interesting about this is it really is kind of a routine investigation of a murder and all that sort of thing. But what's interesting is that Robert Montgomery playing the detective, everything is seen from his eyes. It's seen from that first-person perspective. Okay, so the people who are interacting with Philip Marlowe and talking to him are basically talking right from the screen. So you're looking at people staring at you in the face and talking. And the only time you actually see Philip Marlowe is when he's reflected in a mirror sometime. And there's only a few times in the film where you actually see him. But it's an interesting concept. I think this is one of the only times when this was actually done. Again, not terribly successful, but fascinating to see at least once. Okay? Lady in the Lake. This is part of the Warner Home Video Film Noir Package number 3. Okay? So, very much worth seeing. All right, those are my films for drama. And if you have any questions or comments, please let me know. And I will put a link below for my friend Rob's video so you can watch that as well. Okay? Thank you very much for watching. I will see you later.